Remember this.
I'm absolutely determined to restore honesty and integrity to government, because I think that is core to ensuring that people appreciate that politics can be a force for good.
Yeah. Where do we start? Tulip Siddiq. You couldn't make it up. Labour's anti-corruption minister has been investigated for, yes, you've guessed it, corruption. Tulip Siddiq, the Labour MP for Hampstead and Highgate, is the niece of 77-year-old dictator Sheikh Hasina, who leads the Awami League Party and is the longest-serving Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Now, she is Tulip Siddiq's aunt and was outed last year after serving 15 years in the hot seat. Her aunt had a, shall we say, interesting record when in power. Apparently many of her opponents were attacked and arrested, imprisoned, and some even wound up dead. Tulip, despite apparently trying to distance herself from her aunt, accepted a London flat reportedly given to her by a person who had links to her. Now, ironically, Tulip's brief includes countering economic crime, money laundering and illicit finance. Yet she was reportedly given the two-bedroom property near King's Cross in 2004, and land registry documents revealed that she had not paid for the property and that Abdul Motif, a developer with links to, yes, you guessed it, her aunt, had given it to her. Not dodgy at all, eh? I mean, seriously, have you ever been given a house or a flat by someone? I haven't. Does that sound a bit odd to you? And last week, it was revealed that Tulip accepted freebies for 2 Cricket World Cup matches a few years back, which she correctly recorded in the Register of Interest from a company with links to her aunt's party. Tulip has since referred herself to the independent advisor of ministerial standards. Sir Keir Starmer said, Tulip Siddiq has acted entirely properly by referring herself to the independent advisor, as she's now done, and that's why we brought into being the new code. It's to allow ministers to ask the advisor to establish the facts. And yes, I've got confidence in her, and that's the process that will now be happening. But then, why hasn't he come down hard on Jazz Athwell, Labour MP for Ilford South, the largest landlord in the Commons, who set up a licensing scheme which he himself was in charge of and then didn't bother to adhere to, leaving his tenants in mould and ant-infested flats, despite Angela Rayner promising to crack down on dodgy landlords. He's still in place. So why hasn't Sir Keir Starmer cracked down on him? Why hasn't Jazz Athwell been punished? You can't be a corruption minister and then potentially be involved in corruption. Remember ex-Transport Minister Louise Haigh, sacked from the cabinet for a dodgy episode with the mobile phone resurfacing. Do you remember that?
The game is up. You cannot be a lawmaker and a lawbreaker. And it's time to pack his bags. Only then can the government function again. Only then can the rot be carved out. Only then can we restore the dignity of that great office.
You begin to think that we've been had. I've just got to play this again.
I'm absolutely determined to restore honesty and integrity to government, because I think that is core to ensuring that people appreciate that politics can be a force for good.
Yet he's one of the biggest freebie takers. I'm afraid this Labour government are turning out to be worse than the Conservatives, and that's not easy. And it's only been 6 months. God help us. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. Pressure is mounting on Sir Keir Starmer to sack Treasury Minister Tulip Siddiq after calls for a corruption investigation into her London properties. Then, in my Great British Debate this hour, I'll be asking, should Tulip Siddiq be sacked? My second Great British Debate, I'll be asking, will a national inquiry into the grooming gangs vilify Muslim communities? All of this after Wes Streeting made some comments and Reform UK leader Nigel Farage accused Health Secretary Wes Streeting of attempting to cover up the truth about grooming gangs. Then we'll be getting the latest from America as we cross live to Los Angeles and speak to Paul Duddridge, the host of the Politics People podcast. All of that coming up. As ever, send me your thoughts. Post your comments at gbnews.com/your say. Well, I'm joined now by political commentator Rebecca Reid. Rebecca, welcome to the programme. Thank you for joining me. So, come on, this is yet another episode that has surfaced where Labour have promised to be full of integrity, and suddenly we find out that, in fact, Tulip Siddiq may have some very interesting dealings. Where do you stand with this?
Well, I think to say it's yet another is a little bit unfair. I think you gathered together three examples which don't really all belong together. I think Jas Athwell is the most compelling. I think you are right about that, and I think not getting rid of him is quite shocking. And also, there's now an article on Novara Media about his accusations of sexual assault and how that played out. So I think he probably is, in my opinion, potentially a bit of a bad actor and somebody the Labour Party perhaps should get rid of. Louise Haigh is a different conversation. She resigned. She wasn't sacked, as you said previously. So I think that's a different conversation, but she went. Tulip Siddiq is, again, quite a different conversation. And I think it's important to keep in mind that there is an investigation going on. She referred herself. If the investigation does find that she is guilty of anything, then of course she should resign or be sacked. But at the moment, what we understand is that she was given a flat when she was 21 years old. And while I think lots of us might feel that's like a staggering level of privilege, when you're 21 years old, if somebody offers you a flat, it's not particularly surprising that you might take it. I certainly would have done. I would have bitten someone's hand off. And she wasn't an MP at the time. She wasn't in politics at the time. So I think we have to wait for the results of the investigation. But
she also accepted some tickets, didn't she, to some cricket matches where Bangladesh were playing, and these were given to her by people from a company that had links again with her aunt.
But she declared that, and she was honest about it at the time. And again, I'm not sure that it was necessarily the most sensible thing to have done, but she hasn't tried to hide it. And I think because her aunt was so significant and so powerful, the amount of people who have connections to her aunt is going to be very significant when you're dealing with companies. I mean, I think there's a good discussion to have about what MPs should be taking full stop at all. But I don't think that a company having links to the Prime Minister is particularly surprising. It's just unfortunate for Tulip Siddiq that she happens to be related to somebody who transpired to be fairly unsavoury, but then that's not really her fault.
But then it begs the question, and the point of the monologue was actually about the integrity that they claimed that they were bringing to the table in the political arena. And it turns out that a lot of them are involved in things that some would say seem quite dodgy, and some things as well make them kind of appear worse than the Conservatives. They came on a plinth of being, they're better than them, and I was hoping that they would be, to be fair, but this is not what we're seeing, is it? I mean, surely you couldn't. Do you think that they are on a par with the Conservatives, or in your view, do you think potentially they may well be worse?
No, I think they're probably better. I think, it's a little unfair to compare many, many years of the Conservatives to the short amount of time that the Labour Party's been in power. But I don't think that we're looking at a comparable level of issues here. I think there are issues in how MPs are allowed to take make secondary incomes, and also how MPs are allowed to take freebies. But I think that's consistent across both sides of the parties. But no, I don't. I think if we look at the examples that you gathered in the monologue, apart from Jas, who I do think really should go, I don't think that Louise Haigh or Tulip Siddiq are proven to have done anything that's particularly morally abhorrent. And I think they are, generally speaking, a pretty good bunch of people trying to do a good job. You might not agree with how they're doing it, but I don't think these are bad people. I really genuinely don't.
But you point out it's a short amount of time, but in this short amount of time, it literally seems to be one thing after another. The Conservatives it took a while for certain scandals and things that they did to emerge, but let's be fair, they were there for at least 14 years. But these guys have been there for 6 months, and already I could list at least 5 people who have done things, in such a short space of time. Literally, I mean, it's unprecedented.
I think the rate is pretty comparable. I think the amount of, again, also it depends what you regard as an important scandal, right? Like, I still don't understand the outrage about Partygate. I was never bothered by that before. I remain unbothered by it. However, the amount of stories that came out about that again and again and again was extraordinary. And I think actually the pace at which these stories come out is the same for Labour and for the Conservatives. And to be honest, that pace is set by the public interest of these stories and the news cycle. I think for as long, these stories will come out with the same kind of regular sort of metronomic heartbeat, because every morning we have to come up with stories to put on the front page, and therefore looking for any kind of bad behaviour And I don't think that I really don't think that Louise Haigh, for instance, is a fair comparison. That was a genuine accident that happened many, many years ago, is the same as like Chris Pincher. You know, not all scandals are created equal, but the appetite to read bad things online and in the papers is the same. So I sort of blame us a little bit as much as anything else, honestly.
I was going to say Partygate's a piece of cake compared to all of this. Sorry, I thought that was quite good. No, but listen, the problem with Louise Haigh was that she also parroted the narrative that lawbreakers can't be lawmakers. And, you know, she again stood on the plinth of integrity. And then this thing comes out from, you know, and it's all very dubious. The whole story is very dubious, to be honest. And again, it shows the calibre. Yeah, she may have paid the price for it and everything else like that, and it was a spent conviction. But if you're going to say that lawbreakers can't be lawmakers, then you have broken the law yourself. At some point, it doesn't look good.
I think a lot of Keir's problem come from rhymes. I think his name rhyming with so many things like free gear, not good. And I think coming up with the lawbreakers can't be lawmakers was not a good thing to say, because one of the best appointments they have is the guy who runs Timpson's, whose whole policy is having people who have broken the law get back into jobs and back into work. And the idea that you can't be in a high level position because you've previously broken a law is actually one that I find very uncomfortable to start with, because what about redemption? Like, the whole idea is that actually how great if you can go from being a lawbreaker to being a lawmaker. So I think their mistake was to come up with that rather twee and silly expression, not to have people who have previously had. And, you know, there are plenty of people who I find the Reform MP who has a conviction of violence against a woman, I find that very, very uncomfortable. But my policy remains, people can be rehabilitated, and anybody should be able to be an MP if they have served their time for anything they've done. So I don't think the issue here is people's past, certainly Louise Haigh's accidental mobile phone snafu, but I do think the issue is that they shouldn't have said something as stupid as lawbreakers, lawmakers, because every single time anything comes up, even if it's somebody not wearing a seatbelt 20 years ago, well, then it's very easy to point and go, well, lawbreakers can't be lawmakers. You've really painted yourself into a corner with that one, Keir.
Well, I think that's the problem with a lot of it. Rachel Reeves, thank you very much for talking to me. Rachel Reid, I almost called you Rachel Reeves. Rebecca Reid. Sorry, Rebecca. Sorry about that. That was... forgive me. Well, MP for Ilford South, Jazz Athwell, has said, I'm profoundly sorry the tenants have been let down, and will be reviewing the property management and how matters are escalated going forward. He's also been cleared for sexual harassment and any wrongdoing by the Labour Party, and has said that he was the victim of a politically motivated process. But that still doesn't quite explain why he hadn't paid for licences for half of his properties when he set that whole policy in play. Well, maybe he's got something to say about that.